Okay, colleagues, good evening. Today we have the honor to welcome Mr. Bruno Maire, Minister of the Economy and Finance, joint ministry as usual in France, here in High School of Economics. Our university has been enjoying a long-term and fruitful cooperation with France. And earlier today, we already have an opportunity to present the current state of the cooperation and its prospects to our French colleagues, to the ambassador and their colleagues. We are lucky to have French students and professors join our meetings today. Their active role in HSC life is living testament of the current stage of our academic cooperation. Minister is an alumnus of the École Normale Supérieure, a graduate of Sciences Po, and former students of École Nationale d'Administration in Art. I am pleased to mention that our university is developing partnership relations with all these three outstanding schools. Mr. Maire has an extensive experience of working with different ministers of the French governments, now holding the position of the Minister for the Economy in Edouard Philippe government and under Mr. Macron presidency. In our challenging times, it is essential to get a first-hand assessment of the current situation and prospects for development of relations between our two countries. And now I am giving the floor to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Kuzminov, and thank you, all of us, to attend that meeting and to listen to my speech about Russia and Europe. I can tell you that this is really a great pleasure for me to be back in Moscow. I say to be back because I used to be a diplomat, and as a diplomat, I've been several times to Moscow. And I can tell you that one of my best souvenirs in Moscow is a meeting between former President Jacques Chirac and current President Vladimir Putin. It was in 2003, I think, and it was a meeting about the Iraqi crisis. The Russian government was on the same side as the French government. We were against the war in Iraq, and I think that this is a very clear evidence that at the scale of the history, Russia and France are always on the same side, which is the good side of history. And I wanted to start my statement by that very important souvenir for me. I'm deeply convinced as a Gaullist, because this is a single pattern, political pattern that I accept, that it is really in our common interest to reinforce the links between Europe and Russia, and that the best way of reinforcing the links between Europe and Russia is the way through France and through the French government. And it is also a great honor for me to have on my side the former Minister of Interior, Minister of State, Jean-Pierre Chevènement, and I think that we could applaud Jean-Pierre Chevènement because he did so many things for the good relationship between our two countries. France and Russia are very old countries, and they are both great civilizations. We are not nations that were built in one day. And for centuries, we have watched each other from one end of Europe to the other. we have developed, I would say, a kind of fascination for each other. Our histories are intertwined, our cultures have been nourished by one another. Today, our political relationship is a little bit overshadowed by well-known political differences and disagreements. I'm deeply convinced that those disagreements and those differences will disappear for the sake of a better relationship between France and Russia. And I think that the visit of President Putin to President Macron in May in Versailles is the beginning not only of a beautiful friendship between President Macron and President Putin, but the beginning of a true reinforcement of the links between my country and your country. We need to be realistic. We need to continue to develop and deepen our relationship in all the areas where we can. And there are so many. Economic, of course, but also culture, also innovation, research. On all those topics, I think there is a field of improvement. This pragmatic approach is precisely the path France has followed in recent months, in particular since Emmanuel Macron was elected as our new president. I wanted to start by this remark about the current situation in France, because if we want to understand the best way of reinforcing the relationship between France and Russia, I think that we all have to be aware of the current political and economic situation in each country. In France, the election of Emmanuel Macron has really changed the game. 6 months ago, the French people were faced with a very clear binary choice during the presidential election: hope or fear, openness or nationalism, building Europe or turning our back on Europe. It was the choice between the future embodied by Emmanuel Macron and, I would say, the abandon of what we are with Marine Le Pen. And the French people choose hope. They choose openness. They choose a future at the heart of a stronger Europe that both protects them and defends their interests on the global stage. And I really want to say that I'm so proud of my people that has decided to make that political choice between Emmanuel Macron and an extremist party. They have decided to choose Emmanuel Macron. And when you are looking at other countries that made totally different choices, when you're looking at the UK that made that very negative choice of getting rid of Europe and going out of Europe, I deeply regret that choice, but it has been the choice of the British people. When you are looking at what happened in the United States, I can tell you that I'm proud of the decision that has been taken by the French people. They decided it was time for our country to overcome its divisions. It was time to unite and to transform France and give it the means to play its role in Europe and worldwide. And they gave this clear mandate to Emmanuel Macron and to the government. Transforming France is not an empty formula. We are proud of our welfare state, and we are proud of the equal society it ensures. We do not want to change that. But for too long in France, we have been addicted to public spending. We thought that spending more public money was the right answer to all the difficulties of France. It proved not to be the case. Debt and taxes have become excessive and they weigh on our economy. When you said France, people thought in the past taxes. France means taxes. That was the reaction of all the people all over the world. Now when you say France, people all over the world think renewal, competitiveness, economic recovery. Just 8 months after the election of Emmanuel Macron and after the decisions taken by the new government. Now we are deeply convinced that we need to create wealth before spending it. We need to create the right conditions so that businesses can be profitable, so that they invest, innovate, and create jobs. We have already changed our labor laws to make them more flexible, to make it easier for companies to recruit workers. We are overhauling our tax system. Our corporate tax, it is a decision that has just been taken, will be lowered to 25% over 5 years. We are introducing a flat tax of 30% on capital revenues to encourage investors, both French and foreign, to invest in our country. We are encouraging innovation through a special tax credit, and we will create at the beginning of next year, in 2018, a new fund of around 10 billion euros to fund disruptive innovation, because we have the view that the key for the success of a country is innovation. The countries that will be able to fund innovation, and especially disruptive innovation, will be the winners in the world. Those who won't be in a situation to fund innovation, and especially disruptive innovation, will be dependent on all the other countries, especially the United States and China. We have the best relationship with the United States and the best relationship with China, but we do not want to be obliged to rely on China or the United States as far as innovation and research are concerned. Many more reforms lie ahead on our pension system, on our unemployment insurance system, on our educational and training system. We are determined to tackle all these issues in the coming months. Our aim is to build a stronger economy, where companies are able to grow, to export their goods, to create new jobs. And I will pass next year a law that will be especially devoted to that purpose, to make our companies greater, stronger, able to export, able to win the race of innovation and research. The consequences of our reforming agenda are already being felt. The French voice is being heard once again in Europe. I would say, in one word, France is back. One example. In the space of a few months, we have managed to completely change the debate on the taxation of internet giants. I mean Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. Action is finally happening. For too long, these companies have been able to make huge profits while paying very little tax in countries such as France and Germany. This cannot go on. This is not fair. Smaller local businesses pay their taxes. Why should very successful internet giants not pay their taxes? It also puts our welfare state at risk. Under the leadership of France, we got the support of Germany, Italy, and Spain. We presented a common project to all EU members, and now we have the support of 19 European countries to get that fair taxation of internet giants. And I think that in less than 2 years, we should be able to have, at the European level, a fair taxation of those internet giants. It is a clear evidence that France is back and that the voice of the French government is heard and is able to provide some very concrete outcomes. I'm deeply convinced that we need a greater and a stronger Europe, especially today. A Europe that stands for its own interests and that is able to compete at the same level with the United States and China. This is even more important in today's world, with the United States taking more and more unilateral decisions that have a tremendous impact on European and global economies. It is true for climate, for the tax overhaul that they are designing, for sanctions as well. And on the other hand, with China that has a clear geopolitical vision with its Belt and Road Initiative, there is a place for Europe. And Europe has a key historical role to play between China on the one side and the United States on the other side. We need to be united. We need to be stronger. We need to transform Europe into a real economic and political power. That's exactly what is at stake for the next 5 years. And that is exactly the goal of President Macron, to make Europe stronger, to unify the European countries, and to make them a clear political power which would be in a position to defend its values, its interests. That's exactly what we want to do with President Macron. Something new is happening too with respect to our approach to foreign powers. And I would say towards Russia more than any other country. Because Russia is a special country. Russia is a great country, a great nation with a great history. And that's why we have such a singular link with Russia and with your government. You cannot talk about Russia without strong feelings. No one in Europe is indifferent to Russia. What we want in our relationship is pragmatism, honesty, and clarity. We must be open and direct about our disagreements. We have disagreements. Okay, that's clear. Let's talk about our disagreements. Do not avoid putting on the table the difficulties. We have to speak about the difficulties if we want to get rid of those difficulties. Do not put the things under the table. Put it on the table to solve the issues and to fix the difficulties. We also should be enthusiastic where we agree. And this is where we want to act, where we want to take decisions, where we want to make progress. We want to promote a pragmatic course of action. Yes, there is the political situation that we all know. There are third-party sanctions, and they are hampering our economic relationship. We all know that. There are also European sanctions, and for the time being, the conditions are not met for us to lift or to alleviate those sanctions. But I really hope, that it will evolve, even if it has not yet. Within those constraints, which we will fully respect, we can still develop economic partnerships. Our two nations have always traded, and even though some channels are blocked, we can exploit other channels. Emmanuel Macron, I told you, invited President Putin to Versailles a few days after his elections. It was a reminder of Tsar Peter's visit in 1717. It was a clear sign towards history and a way to highlight the depth of our historical bonds. That day, Emmanuel Macron proposed to Vladimir Putin that both countries should give a renewed impetus to our economic and industrial partnership. And we will do so. We will give a new impetus to our economic and industrial partnership in the framework that I just described. It was not the first sign. The renewal of the CEFIC, the body that promotes our economic relationship, was already one. CEFIC did not meet in 2015, but it was reinstated by Emmanuel Macron when he was Minister for the Economy in 2016, because he knew how important our ties to Russia are. He has not changed his mind since then, and I'm now in charge of the French economy, and I'm exactly the same view. We have to improve the ties, the economic ties between France and Russia. We have jointly decided to convene the CEFIC twice this year. We should have explained, well, there has already been a meeting of the CEFIC at the beginning of 2017, in spring 2017. It's not useful to reorganize a new meeting before the end of 2017. We have taken another decision. We have decided to organize that CEFIC this day to give a new impetus to our economic relationship. I say deepening our economic relationship because France and Russia have always had a close economic relationship. We have built over time strategic partnerships on space, on energy, on car manufacturing, on aeronautic. The importance of these projects shows how much trust there can be between us. On space programs, our cooperation began when Russia was still part of the USSR. It has been strengthened over time, as our partnership between Roscosmos and Arianespace illustrates. On energy, cooperation is alive and kicking as recent events in Yamal highlight. The work of Total and Novatec has been really impressive. French companies were resilient in Russia when the crisis hit in 2009 and during its aftermath. They didn't leave, they stayed. Now that the Russian economy is picking up with good prospects, we can develop those relationships further. Today, France is the first foreign employer in Russia, with nearly 117,000 jobs. Almost all of our big listed companies are present in Russia. France is also the first provider of foreign direct investment in flow. And I want to be very clear with you. We do not want just to trade with Russia. We want to invest in the future of Russia. And we want to invest in the future of the relationship between France, Europe, and Russia. We see that Russia is shifting towards a new economic model, and that's very good news. The authorities are setting new priorities. The development of Russia's own market is key. Russia wants, and of course it is the right way of proceeding, to reduce the volume of imports and develop domestic companies. I believe Russia is right in trying to diversify its economy. The country wants to invest in innovation and new technologies, and I just explained how important it is for the power of Russia, for the power of any country to invest in innovation and new technologies. The best example of this resolution can be seen in Skolkovo. This site is evidence of the vitality and dynamism of Russia. It is evidence to the talent of his youth. And we think we have much to bring you in this global project. But to develop our economic ties, we need them to be based on rules, mutually agreed and mutually respected. We are ready to help and to play an active part in the Russia of tomorrow. We just have to ensure a well-balanced cooperation that is mutually beneficial. One aspect which is really fundamental for us is reciprocity. This word of reciprocity, I just used it during my last visit to China and to Beijing. I say it to all our partners. We believe in open economies. We believe in open trade. They benefit everyone. And we do not believe in protectionism, because protectionism would lead to a kind of economic war among nations. But if we want trade to develop, we need a level playing field. We need the same rules. We need reciprocity among nations. That's exactly the point that I wanted to make clear, that I make clear to all our partners. On those principles and on those rules, I'm deeply convinced that we will be able to reinforce the links between our two countries and to improve the economic situation in Russia and in France. Research and innovation have to be driving force of our future relationship with strong ties between our SMEs. Tomorrow, with Minister Oreshkin, we will launch a common work on the city of the future, which is the main topic of the dialogue of Trianon, put in place by our two presidents. I'm convinced that it paves the way for fruitful cooperation between our companies for the citizens of our two countries. To conclude my statement, I just wanted to recall how important 2018 will be for France and Russia. For Russia, there is, of course, the presidential election. I'm sure that this election and also the Football World Cup on the same year, these major and international and festive events will be the occasion to celebrate sport and youth, because youth brings innovation, modernization, and ambitions. For France and Russia, an important event will be held in May with the visit of the French President Macron at the St. Petersburg Forum. These two events will be a unique opportunity to show that Russia's relationship with the rest of the world is not only about geopolitics, but also about citizens. Our societies and our companies can cooperate and share common passions. The passion of sport, the passion of literature, music, arts, the passion of innovation, the passion of technologies. And I rely on you, the new students of the new generation, to make those passions alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Now we have some time for questions. Some questions, colleagues? Please. Your question, please.
Есть. My magazine is Ecology City, Ecograd in Moscow. Question, maybe collaboration in renewable energy, low carbon energy, together France and Russian Federation. A very important question. First step. Excuse me, thanks. Может быть сотрудничество России и Франции в области не газа, не нефти, а возобновляемой энергетики низкоуглеродной. И какой первый шаг? Какие могут быть инновации совместные в этом вопросе? И поскольку у вас Министерство финансов, то как это может финансироваться?
We have a very strong cooperation in the field of energy. That's not a mystery. And it has always been the case between our two countries. And Jean-Pierre Chevènement took part to the opening of this new plant in Yamal, which is a very important project between Total, one of the most important world companies in energy, and other Russian companies. We all know that there will be a kind of revolution in the field of energy in the next years. We all know that we have to invest in renewable energy and also in innovation, especially in disruptive innovation, to find a way of having a good and sure storage of the renewable energies. And the country which will be able to find the right technical solution to that challenge of the storage of renewable energy will take the lead on that field. And that's why I think that a cooperation on the question of low-carbon energy between France and Russia would be a great idea. All the energy companies, Engie, Total, EDF are on the way to invest more and more in renewable energies. All the European states are aware that we have to win the battle of innovation on renewable energy, and that the core of the battle on renewable energy is the question of storage. I'm open to that kind of cooperation with Russia.
Thank you. Another question, please. Irina. Yeah. Irina.
How to make a case for Paris versus Frankfurt as a financial hub, the lack of Brexit? What additional tax can you offer in the framework of EU regulation? Could you imagine the situation that in a few years the city will have more degrees of freedom?
If you have a choice to make between Paris and Frankfurt to relocate your activities, let's imagine that you are a member of Goldman Sachs or a member of JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, and you have a choice to make whether I relocate my activities from London to Paris or to Frankfurt. There is a competition, I would say, a friendly competition, of course, between Paris and Frankfurt. We have some advantages in Paris. First, we have decided to change our tax system and to make it more attractive for foreign investors. We have decided, for instance, to reduce the level of corporate tax once again from 33.3% to 25% by 2022. This is the first reason to choose Paris instead of Frankfurt. The second argument that I could put on the table is regulation. I think that we have maybe the best financial regulators in Paris. The third argument that I would like to explain is that France has now the leadership on the green finance. And the future of finance is green finance. I mean, new financial products with the view of funding renewable energies. That's the third argument. I would add a very last argument, but maybe the decisive one. Ask your wife whether she would prefer to spend a weekend in Frankfurt or in Paris.
It's a good argument. Irina.
Yeah. Mr. Minister, I'm a head of finance here in that university. This is academic school of finance. And I have a question. You are a Minister of Economy and Finance. You are a person, a very top person who is watching and monitoring in monetary terms, capital flows, cash flows, many things, but expressed mostly in monetary terms. That's your job. What's your personal opinion? Do we need special efforts to develop non-financial indicators, non-financial information, which is describing, which aims to describe intellectual capital, which is really used in the business, in the companies? What could be your opinion? Can we cooperate between universities, between our two countries in this area to develop this set of indicators? As I know, France is has its own national part in World Intellectual Capital Initiative, which is a global networking between academics, business people, consultants, and regulators in the area of development of these type of indicators. What do you personally think about the need to do this, to push it forward, and how your ministry can support these activities?
Yes, I share your point of view that that kind of indicators might be very useful. And I think that your school, which is a high-level school, could really play its part in developing that kind of indicators. And I'm not in charge of education, but I'm in charge of finance, and I think that opening a cooperation between France and Russia on this idea of developing new indicators with students like you, with business leaders, with academics, would be a very good idea. So I share your point of view on that.
Thank you very much, because we really want to become a university who is leading this area in our country.
Okay, now a question from the left wing, please. Your question, please.
Could you please switch on your microphone?
Turn on microphone.
Yeah. I wanted to ask your view on the upcoming American sanctions. I ask for a French opinion because, of course, many of those who will be targeted can have considerable assets in France, and how you think about handling this.
That's a critical issue. I think that we have to do our best to preserve a level playing field at world level for trade and for economic cooperation. Introducing extraterritorial sanctions, and that's the decision that has been taken by the United States, is a matter of concern for us, because it might jeopardize the economic relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. And I really think that it is not in the interest, of course, of European countries, of Russia, but also of the United States. We have another matter of concern, which is the new tax reform that might be introduced by the Trump administration before the end of the year. I will not criticize the choice made by the Trump administration to reduce the level of corporate tax by around 20 or 22%. We are doing exactly the same in France, and this is for the sake of competitiveness, and this is up to the American administration or to the French administration or to the Russian administration to decide the right level of corporate tax in its own country. So I will never criticize such a decision. But I'm concerned, and other countries in Europe are concerned, about the possibility of an introduction of a double taxation through that tax reform. Double taxation of the American companies that are present in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, all over in Europe. Why? Because if there is a double taxation of American companies in Europe, we run the risk of having those American companies leaving Europe and destroying a very important number of jobs in Europe. That's why we have decided, with my Spanish counterpart, with my German counterpart, with my Italian counterpart, all 5 finance ministers of Europe, of the most important countries, the British Minister of Finance also decided to sign the letter. We have decided to send a letter to the Trump administration and to our counterpart, the Secretary of Treasury, Steven Mnuchin, to explain our concern. And we have made very clear that this idea of introducing a double taxation against American companies based in Europe would be a matter of huge concern for us and would contravene the rules of the OECD. What is interesting in that is that it is, I think, one of the first time where 5 European countries, 5 important European countries, decided not to oppose the United States, but to make their case and to make very clear what are our red lines. I wanted to make that very clear because this is a very important issue for us, and it proves that united, the European countries are able to gain more power and more influence in the world.
Okay. Colleagues, Vice Prime Minister Varkovich is waiting. Minister Maire in the next room. So I should stop the question session. Thank you so much for your presence.
I'd just like to add a very last word to thank your president for hosting that conference, but also to thank you. To thank you for your presence and to tell you that you should never forget that you are the future of this nation. You are the future of this great nation, which is Russia. And Russia is a matter of dream for many countries, a matter of hope for many countries. You should never forget that. So when I'm coming back to Russia, I hope next year, I really hope to have the opportunity to have a longer exchange of views between you and I. I will not deliver any statement, but we will have a very long exchange of views on any questions that we would like to ask to me. Thank you, and thank you for attending that conference.
Thank you, Minister.